This episode is with Hemanth Mohan, a postdoctoral associate at Duke University in the Department of Neurobiology. His area of focus is on how the cortex processes sensorimotor information. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for making time.
My pleasure.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a great day here in Are you in Miami, I assume?
I'm in Miami, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's a great day here, a bit not too hot, around 25, 26, so it's going good. How about you?
I'm doing well as well. Here it is pretty hot.
It is?
It's not 26, it's around I want to say in the 90s.
I see.
Maybe hitting 100. Yeah, so
oh wait, that's
pretty
in
warm.
Fahrenheit. I mean,
It's Celsius.
I still haven't gotten there yet.
So Celsius it's around 33, 34.
Right.
So pretty hot.
I see. I can imagine. It's the same year, but it's just past couple of days. I know there was some kind of a thunderstorm kind of a prediction. So the clouds are up, the humidity is a bit up as well. So that kind of cooled down. Probably for a couple of days, and then it's going to go up again.
It's weird, this whole thing with the metric system, and then the system they use here in America. I'm from Mexico, so I also use meters, Celsius, all these.
Oh, you do?
All these things. Yeah,
I see. So since when have you been in the US?
I've been in the US since around my penultimate year of high school. So I did my last 2.5 years of high school here in the US. Before that, all of my education was back in Mexico.
I see. So it's how many years now? Because I'm just wondering, how long does it take to switch your brain completely to the American system?
I want to say it's been around 5.5, almost 6 years now.
It's around the same for me. Around the same for me. I mean, most things have been, I've switched on most aspects, but the temperature and distance is something I'm still
distance
not gotten to that point.
Distance is weird. I always hear when it comes to houses, for example, right? Whenever you're looking at a house or watching a real estate video or whatever, and they're like, oh, it's 400 square feet. I'm like, how much is 400? Is that big? Is that small? I'm not sure. Back home,
I have the same thing.
Back home, it's always in square meters, and I'm like, oh, it's a 400 square meter house. Okay, that's pretty big, but I'm not sure with a feet. It's weird.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's the same for me as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to temperature and Fahrenheit, it's I usually know when it comes to like the change or the transition between Celsius to Fahrenheit. I know how to like interpret it when it comes to higher temperatures, just because I'm used to living in Florida, which is hotter. But but when it comes to
the negative
Celsius,
negatives, I get
or
that.
Like 10 Celsius below, I'm lost with how much it is.
No, same. I do have I have two numbers in my head for the Fahrenheit. One is 90 and one is 30. I know below 30 I don't like it, and above 90 I don't like it. So I think between that it's
manageable.
Manageable. That's how I think in terms of Fahrenheit. And with the Celsius, I'm far more tuned to understanding what each number means.
Yeah, that's funny. So where are you from originally?
From India.
Okay.
South of India, a city called Bangalore. It's changed the name recently to Bengaluru, but yeah. Are you familiar with
not with Bangalore? No, I like how far away, or where is it oriented in terms of, like, for example, Delhi?
So Delhi is in the north.
Okay.
Like all the way in the north of India, and Bangalore is pretty much all the way to the south.
Oh, so really a big difference.
It's quite far. I mean, it's almost I would say 2.5 hours, 3 hours by plane.
Yeah, because India is a big country.
It is, but not as big as the US, but it's pretty big.
Yeah.
But the US is similar, quite wide.
It is wide. It's similar in Mexico. You know, we have, if you go, well, actually, if you go to the northernmost point of Mexico, you take a plane down to the southernmost point. It's probably more than 3 hours. I want to say it's probably around four,
Oh,
maybe
wow.
4.5. So it's like long too. I know India's kind of long too, not so much wide.
Right, right. Yeah, it's more big on the length than on the width. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. Did you do, um, did you start your neuroscience studies back in India?
No, not really. So I did my engineering in biotechnology in India. And over there, I mean, for many in India, uh, people decide what they want to do after they do their engineering, especially from the metros. So engineering is almost like, something people have to do after their engineering or medicine, or one of those higher degrees is something that you don't choose. It's just something you do because it's what everyone does. And it's after that you decide really what is it, or what profession you want to move towards on average. So I did my engineering in biotechnology,
Okay.
and it's during that time when I started to think about, hey, what is it I exactly want to do, what is it that I like doing. um, but I did have passion for genetics though. So even within engineering, the reason I chose to do biotechnology was because in school, I think while doing my 11th 12th grade, is it what you call it here as well?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So while doing my 11th 12th grade is when I was first introduced to this whole field of molecular biology and using genetics, and then trying to understand how genes can um, pretty much dictate how you look or what kind of characteristics you have. And that really caught my attention. So that's something I really wanted to study. So I took up biotechnology, but it wasn't like a very clear idea what is it that I wanted to do. And then so biotechnology engineering degrees in India for 4 years. So usually it's when you're doing your third year, you get to do an internship, which is like you go out of your college and then you look for some kind of opportunities outside to do 6 months, 7 months field work. And over there, uh, I was kind of fascinated with the brain, mostly because of documentaries. Not really, haven't really read as much at that point, but I wanted to, at least I knew among all the things that I was exposed to, that was something I was very interested about. I mean, understanding how the brain works and the fact that you can think. And I must say I was also influenced a bit by philosophy and consciousness and those kind of things as well. So I just wanted to explore the direction. And then there was this institute in Bangalore called the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, where they do both, treat patients as well as they have a research department as well. So I did an internship there for 6 months. And I guess that's when I realized, okay, this is really cool, to study how the brain works and the kind of work they do. And neuroscience, well, in the West, also it's quite, it's not a well-established field, in the sense that we still don't know a lot of things of how the brain works. In India, it's far more, it was, at least back then, it was far more nascent. It wasn't a well-developed field. So there was this whole, you know, uh, uh, aspect of it being new and interesting. And it's if you think about it, when you're in the field, the amount of uh, things we don't know is so much more than many other fields, right? If you just compare it with cardiology, or compare it with understanding how the lungs work, I mean, understanding the brain is, we still don't know so much about the brain compared to
Right.
most other organs of the human body. And that kind of caught me, or at least caught my attention a lot. So I did my internship there, and I guess that's when I decided that, hey, this is something I actually want to pursue. It seems like it really took, at least it got me to, uh, how do I put it? Among all the things that I was I studied or I explored, this really caught my attention the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, the brain is personally, I think it's the most interesting organ and interesting part of the body to study and just to learn about, just because there's so many aspects that go into the brain. You know, you have, like you said, you have consciousness, which we know not a lot about. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you have the whole, I guess, study of dreams and what do dreams mean and the
Oh yeah,
implications of
yeah,
dreams.
yeah,
You have the genetic aspect of it, that, you know, and then you have how maybe in the future technology could be integrated into in some way with the brain. And then
yeah.
you have all these different, you know, research, I guess, paths that you can take when it comes to neuroscience, and
Right, right,
it's growing, increasingly becoming more popular nowadays. And so
right.
I think it's a very, very, the most interesting part of the body, in my opinion, to
Oh yeah,
learn
for
about.
sure, for sure. Yeah, no, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have a side question. I'm not sure, but do do you happen to know how, what percentage of people in India go to college, or have a
Uh,
rough idea?
you know,
Would you
it's
say it's a majority, or no?
I I wouldn't know. I mean, it's hard
Okay,
because a lot of the statistics I would put out, even if I could, if I would think about it, would be really based on the metro population because I was born and brought up in a metro city, like, in Bangalore.
hmm,
Though I spent a part of my time in the Gulf as well. My dad went to work there, so I spent a small part of my life there. But in terms of numbers, I mean, even if I would just want to throw out something from my mind, I don't know how it works in, the towns and villages. I still don't know what percentage of people go
right,
there for higher education, and I don't have that number. So it'll
yeah,
be a bit, hard for me to even guess
yeah.
what the
It's
percentage would
similar.
be.
It's similar in that sense in Mexico. You know, well, I don't think I'd be able to tell you an exact metric or a statistic, but for the most part, when it comes to bigger cities, right? I'm from Mexico City. You know,
Right,
if you go to Mexico City, um, I want to say, and I might be not 100% correct on this, but I want to say that a good percentage of the population tend to go to, you know, some college, you know,
right,
do some sort of degree.
right,
Um, the thing is, like you said, when it comes to villages or the smaller cities or those smaller towns, I'm sure, you know, the percentage decreases a lot. And
yeah,
I think the bigger thing, you know, it's not so much that whether go to college or not, but rather the quality of the education they're receiving, because it's so different. You know, for the most part, the institutions that you can find in Mexico, there's a couple that are, you know, that are good institutions and that are, you
right,
know, recognized, and I'm sure you can learn a lot of valuable information in these schools, but there's more that, you know, aren't that good,
right,
aren't that valuable. And
right,
so
right,
when it comes to that sort of education, and that is where the majority of the people will go, right? And so, you know, they will get this education, but really, to what point is that education solid and can build a foundation that they can then work off of? It's very
right,
different when it comes to the US. For example, here education is a lot more prioritized than, say, back in Mexico. And I
right, right.
imagine it's somewhat similar in India in that way.
I would think so too. Also, I think, Alan, that uh, I think higher education is also not necessary for most people. As long as you have, and I think this is true, at least in India, that you do have colleges where you can do engineering, you can do medicine, you can do a Bachelor of Science, and all these really new fields like microbiology and uh, electrical engineering. But I think where you really need human power is where you have specific skill sets that need to be developed. Something like in agricultural fields where people need to learn how to use certain machineries and certain skills, like how to build houses in specific ways, and which is labor intensive. A lot of fields are labor intensive, and I think it's also essential that there are a lot more of these uh, I don't know what you would call them, training centers, where you can impart specific skills to people rather than everyone going for these higher education degrees, right? Because I think there are a lot more opportunities open or available in these sectors than just these higher degree or this so-called higher education uh, fields.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the problem is that a lot of times, the majority of the time, when it comes to trying to get a job, they will ask for those degrees.
That's true with the US, I would guess, also because it's far more developed. You have so many industries which require that the advanced knowledge. But I'm not sure it's true for at least for India, where you don't,
Okay.
at least now there are a growth of industries where you really need people with machine learning skills and computer science skills. But earlier, a lot of things were imported. You would, even 20 years back, you would import a lot of technology from the West, and you need people to use these machines, use these machineries, and a lot of labor work, which is changing now, thankfully. But back then, I, if you had invested enough in also at least building up the skill sets of people, I think that would also be that's probably also an essential aspect of providing employment as well.
Yeah,
If that's the direction you want to, if that's what
yeah,
that's what you mean.
yeah, but and I think that makes sense. I think that if that's what they're doing in India, I think that's a probably a better way to do than like this higher education, just because aside from from people learning these technical skills and these specific skills for the job itself that's required,
Right.
aside from that, it's people for the most part will get to choose what they want to specialize in.
Mhm.
And by choosing what you want to specialize in, you can choose something that entices you more or that you like more, and by
Right.
doing that you'll be able to, when it comes to learning, pay more attention, you'll enjoy it more. And when you enjoy something more, you're willing to put more effort into it, right? And
Yeah,
when it comes to higher education, a lot of times, we're learning things that we don't perhaps necessarily like that much. Or at least, so me, for example, right, I'm about to finish my degree in business technology, which is computer science pretty much integrated into the business field.
I see.
And when
This
I
is,
when I chose that,
sorry if I can stop you. This is undergrad?
yeah, I'm about to
Okay.
finish my undergrad degree. Yeah. And I'm looking at, I was looking at graduate programs. I was looking at different options as to what I should do next. We can talk about that, a little bit forward. But I was, when it comes to that degree, I was interested when I chose it in the technology aspect, machine learning, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, all these different things. I was interested in them. But then a lot of times I have to also learn, finance and accounting and
Mhm.
marketing, and I'm not that much interested in those things. I ended up not really liking that technology aspect as much as I thought I would. But even though I didn't like that much, I still think it's better than, for example, accounting. But I have to learn accounting, and I don't tend to pay more attention in accounting. I want to pay more attention to things that I enjoy. And
I
so
mean,
if I specifically would focus just on that with the
right,
technical school that taught me just that, I think that's a
right.
better way to do things.
That, I mean, that's one aspect, Alan, but also I think it's important to, at least that's something that I learned, is your what you like or what you enjoy actually evolves with time. You might think that you don't like accounting, but I would I would assume that, let's say, 10 years down the line, you have one of your own company, or you're working for a company, and you're really involved in the growth of the company, and that need to see that growth would would automatically make you attract to liking accounting, just because you realize its value, its potential, and the fact that you've invested in that superior goal will start making you like a lot of the things which helps you in getting to that goal. So right now, it's more like you're just learning whatever you're learning just for the fact that it's a part of your curriculum, right? It's not really something that you're using for something. But I'm pretty sure that 10 years down the line, let's say you have a company, and as I just mentioned, you're going to like accounting just for the fact that you'll see its nuances and how it can help reach your goal. And once you understand the nuances of certain field, your love for it really grows. At this point, you're seeing a big picture view, but when you get into it, for example, there are aspects of, I mean, just to, digress a bit, there are aspects of math which I didn't like earlier. I really didn't like calculus, for whatever it is. I was like, hey man, what's the point of understanding integration and differentiation? I mean, there's certain aspects, I like biology a lot, but then now that I'm doing, recording brain activity and trying to understand how brain activity is being encoded. And once I see how calculus can be used to understand those dynamics that I'm measuring, eh, the respect and the love and the need to learn that has grown so much more than what it was earlier. And I realized that, once you understand the value of these subjects and the need for you, for you to employ it to get to a specific goal, you start to appreciate and like it a lot more than, at this specific stage that you are in.
Yeah, I agree with that, because when it comes to something that you do enjoy, the brain, like you said, right? For example, let's just say that I wasn't, for whatever reason, I didn't like chemistry, but I really enjoyed learning about the brain and the biology and the makeup of the brain.
Right.
At some point you're going to have to integrate chemistry into it, right? But if you're learning just the periodic table, is very different to when you're learning chemistry when it comes to the
True.
brain and how it
True.
applies
True.
to the brain. And so
True.
how we're taught accounting is very boring. But I'm
Right.
sure
Right. Yeah,
that if you
I
apply
agree.
it to the way that you like to learn things, or to the
Yeah.
field that you are interested in, it
Yeah.
changes. And I agree
Yeah.
with you with that, in that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. And I guess that's where internships come into pictures, the practical aspect of these subjects. When you apply it, I guess that your appreciation for these subjects, grow manyfold than just studying it at our college.
Yeah. And I think, in addition to your appreciation, I think the more you start to learn about these things, the more you discover that there is always more to learn. It kind of never ends. It's this never ending research that you just keep going,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
if it's something that, you know, is something that's progressing, and that is seen as a possible field for the future, or something that have to do with the future. There's always more research coming in. So
Yeah.
that's something, I guess, that's also interesting about fields and areas of study that still have a lot of progression to come.
Right.
Yeah. So what it is, what, when it comes to neuroscience and your specific research, what do you do?
Um. So. Uh, so what I'm doing currently is, so you want me to go into like in depth or give a more broad picture?
If you want, we can give a broad picture, and then we can elaborate on
Okay,
certain
great.
things. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm doing right now is, at a very high level, understand how a specific part of the brain, which is called the cortex, which is this top part of the brain, how that uh, processes, or how does it encode the incoming sensory information so that it can use that information to drive what kind of behavior or what kind of motor commands that you need to that it needs to produce in order to achieve a goal. For
Okay.
example, if you're eating food, which is what I use that as a model system, how do you sense the food that's there in front of you, and what kind of action do you perform in order to get that food to your mouth, right? And then when you're chewing that food, how does the brain know, how to manipulate the food that you're holding while you're chewing, right? And then how does it use all of this sensory information, which is happening in real time? That's a closed loop system where you're constantly sensing whatever you're sensing, and then use the sensory information to drive appropriate motor commands to achieve a goal, in this case, which is to finish or to eat the food.
By sensory information, you mean vision, taste,
Vision, taste, smell,
hearing?
yeah,
Okay.
hearing, all of that.
Right. So you see how different tasks affect the cortex, um, or how sensory information is perceived by the cortex, and like the respective like reactions that take place, or what comes after, like what process takes place then.
So right. So what I do is, so we using different methods, we record activity from so the brain cell. The way it works is, so the way brain processes information is using electric. Uh, uh, um, how do I put this? Using electrical energy, right? So it uses these chemicals to generate electrical energy, electrical commands, and that's how each cell in the brain, which generates this electric current, or this change in fluctuation in ion channels, sorry, fluctuation in voltage, which is electric energy, and uses that kind of communication system to process to send information from one brain cell to another brain cell, right? And in a specific part of the cortex, you have these hundreds, not hundreds, you have thousands of neurons which are talking to each other, which are communicating with each other through these electric signals. And everything, let's say everything that you perceive at the end is transmitted from the source organ, in this case it's the tongue, all the way to the cortex via electrical commands, So we use different methods to record these electrical commands and then try to understand using techniques from statistics, from probability, from machine learning now, which has become a very big application, to understand how these electrical signals that we're reading, try to make sense of how we might how we think, or how we're trying to model how the brain might be interpreting these electrical signals to create this perception of what you have tasted. And
Okay.
then convert that electrical signals to other kind of electrical signals, which is essentially commanding your organs to move in a specific way to to complete a specific action.
Okay, I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you're increasingly now you're trying to apply machine learning when it comes to perceiving the signals. How if you can elaborate on that, how is machine learning currently being applied?
So, I mean, you must also, I think machine learning, while it seems like it's something that's new, or something that's come up in the past 10 years or something, machine learning really is an evolved, or a more a more uh, a subset of statistical tools. And statistics has been used, I don't know, for the past 40-50 years in trying to understand how uh, uh, the brain processes information. So essentially, the way you apply any of these statistical tools, including machine learning, is that when you record activity from a brain, the different ways of recording, we can go into that maybe a bit earlier, but let's say you're recording in one specific way. In almost any case, right, what you're reading out, or the information that you get, are a set of numbers that's moving up and down.
The
Just
waves,
like
like brain waves, right?
brain waves is one thing, but so the way a cell spikes, the way a cell processes information is something called a spike, wherein
Okay.
it's called an action potential.
Right, like when
Uh,
it fires.
exactly, when it fires.
Right.
So there are two ways of reading, right? One is, if you look at collection of these neurons firing together, wherein 100 neurons are firing together, then what you would get is a brain wave, which is an average of these 100 neurons firing. But what I do is record from a single cell, right? While
Okay.
you also get the brain wave, you also get these action potentials, which when the cell fires, it becomes a 1. And when it doesn't fire, it remains as a 0. So it's also like a binary code. And you can record these binary codes from hundreds of cells from the same area. And then, so what you get at the end is, one of the brain waves, and the other thing are these binary signals, 1 and 0, from these specific areas. And that's all. It's this, everything that you collect in your, at least in my field, are these numbers. And then you have these numbers, and then you have behavior, which you're also recording on the side to see what the animal is doing, and try to understand, or that's where statistics and machine learning comes in, where you try to use these statistical mathematical tools to build models to understand how might these numbers that we are seeing correlate or might generate these behaviors that we are observing in the mouse
Okay.
or in
So,
the animal.
so, whatever, for example, you see a number of neurons firing with the ones, then you can look at the behavioral interpretation and see, okay, what happened at this particular moment.
Exactly. And then
Okay.
say that, hey, these bunch of neurons which fire with these specific patterns correlate with the animal doing something like, moving its hand in that specific area. So you know that these bunch of neurons, if they would fire in the specific pattern, the animal would produce that. It happens whenever the animal let's say, moves its hand, then you say that, hey, this area is associated or correlated with the movement of hand, for example.
Okay.
And now machine learning, with the computation, so, you could, so earlier you would record from one cell, it becomes easy to look at activity from one cell, right? But now you have hundreds of cells. So machine learning essentially is a form of pattern recognition. So you're trying to look for, in all of these huge amounts of data, what is a common pattern that you can find that would associate this brain activity you're recording from the behavior that the animal is producing.
Right. How do you record behavior?
So there are different ways, but the most common way is through cameras.
Okay. So
You
you
just
film the animal.
you film the animal.
Right.
That's another. So even 10 years back, even I would say even 5 years back, if you would want to understand, when you're filming an animal, in order to understand how the brain is correlated with specific behavior, it's, either you do a visual tracking where you have to look at every frame that what the monkey or the mouse is doing, and let's say track a hand at each frame to manually annotate. You need to manually say, hey, the hand is here, the hand is here. Or in certain cases, you have these track poles that you attach to the, let's say, a monkey, for example. And then, like how you would, earlier make films, you had, ways to kind of track these track poles. But the dimensions was very small. You could record only, either a hand or a few body parts, for example. And that's where machine learning today has become very crucial in understanding behavior. So with machine learning now, you can look at videos, using these convolutional neural networks and all of these advanced neural network theories. You can just get a bunch, just record video, high frame videos, and then you can actually track any part of the body you want, because you can train these networks to identify what a hand looks like, to identify what a mouth looks like, to identify what eyes look like, right? And then this way you can, just by recording any video in any form, you can train these networks to do what used to take tremendous amount of time earlier. That's another aspect of machine learning where it's being used a lot today in neurosciences, to understand or to track a behavior essentially, or to annotate behavior. In fact, you can even break down behavior into different components depending on how you apply these statistical tools, which
Okay.
earlier was very hard to do.
Right. You mentioned that these studies, they're done with animals, I suppose, probably with rats, I believe.
Rats, mice, you have a huge field working with zebra fishes, which are these small fish, with birds, zebra finches, with a monkey not so much. It's really a very small niche subset of experiments that you can do with them.
Okay.
With yeah, I think that's pretty much what I said, was like 80-90%. And flies, yeah, Drosophila, the fruit fly is also a very big aspect of animal research. So these would
Okay.
essentially cover 90% of the animal work that's done in neuroscience.
Now, of course, ethics in psychology is a big, it's something that always has to be considered. But, when you're explaining to me kind of the things that you do and how you interpret this data and what the aim of these types of studies are, I would imagine, and, I might be wrong, I don't know, right? But I would imagine that perhaps studying an actual human eating, I don't think there would be any sort of problems when it comes to ethics in that sense. Is there a problem? Like, is there a way to
I mean,
study
the
humans?
the ethical part is not the behavior component, it's the recording component. That's where it gets a bit hard, right? So in this case, while the mouse is, I mean, eating is just one example. You could, it's each lab studies different behaviors, but let's just take eating for an example. While the animal is eating, you're opening up the skull to insert electrodes
Oh,
into the
okay.
brain to then record how these neurons fire. And that's not something you can do,
Right.
just
Now,
like
I
that. And
thought, yeah, no, I thought it was sort of like an EEG machine, which isn't as invasive, for example.
you could
But
do, right,
okay,
right. So you could do EEG. I mean, that's fine. But again, EEG gives you very, very coarse information, right? Your record. So what I said earlier, what I'm recording is not from collection of neurons, but actually from single neurons. So
right.
you can actually look at how one cell fires in a specific way. I must also add, since I didn't want to go into specifics, what I do is actually what's novel, or what makes the work I do really distinct is that we don't just record from single neurons, we record from something called genetically identified neurons. So the mice model that we use, these are genetically modified. And the way we modify them is that we can express certain dyes means like a color,
Yeah.
in specific cell types within the brain. So you modify the mouse in such a way that you can express a specific color in one specific cell type in one area of the brain. And another way that I record these neurons is, one way is using electrodes. What I do more specifically in my research is I use light to record these neurons. So the way these neurons work is that when there is an action potential, the we we genetically encode a fluorescent dye into the cell such that when there is an action potential, the amount of fluorescence in the cell goes up. So the cell lights up, literally like a bulb. And when the action potential stops, the cell turns off. It goes dark. So now you can put a camera, you make a craniotomy, put a camera, and look for lights turning up and turning down.
Like
So
actual, and you can see actual
you can
lights.
actually see,
Okay.
you can actually see the light going up and going down. So now, and these are microscopes, right? It's camera with a microscope. So it's not like you're looking at just the head. You can actually zoom in to look at
Right.
hundreds of neurons with the resolution of each neuron. So you can actually look each cell lighting up and lighting off. So now, and it's not just any cell, because you've genetically engineered this mouse, even within that brain area recording, you can choose which set of neurons you want to insert this light into. And now, so in that same area, you can look in one experiment how one set of neurons are lighting up and lighting up and down during the same behavior. And another experiment within the same area, you can look at how another group of neurons are doing this. So now you know that how in that same area, different types of neurons, how they behave. And this becomes very essential when, as we go ahead, we realize that not all cells in the brain, just like in the human body, are the same, right? It's possible that in certain diseases, that one cell type is more affected than the other. So you can try to build therapeutics to target this one specific cell type, rather than the way it is done now, where you just inject a drug and it literally goes to all areas of the brain, or literally targets every cell. And that's the reason why, I mean, one of the fields in medicine which really needs a lot of research is psychiatry, right? Because a lot of these drugs work in such global ways that the side effects are so much more
Yeah.
stronger than in other diseases, because most of these drugs work in a ways we don't understand, one, but also are very global in their action. But now, if we know that each of these neurons are doing something specific, we can find ways to target or find ways to fix how this specific set of neurons are misbehaving, rather than using a more global approach, which can cause to a lot of unnecessary side effects.
That's interesting. So I guess the application in the future, what's one of the things that it aims to do is to be able to like you said, for example, when it comes to psychiatry, to be able to have a certain medicine or a certain treatment approach a specific cell, like one
Set a
neuron,
group
right?
of cells, right? One
Oh,
group of
group of
neurons.
cells. Okay.
Yeah,
Group of neurons instead of affecting the brain as a whole.
exactly,
And that way being more efficient without the unintended side effects.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, with limited background in psychology that I have, I was initially majoring in psychology as well. I was doing a double major. But with the little bit that I know, I am a big I'm very much against the use of medicine that in some way or form alters the brain chemistry unless it's absolutely necessary, in my opinion, for the person to use. Like there's
Right.
people that have chemical deficiencies or um, imbalances in the brain. In that case, I think it's reasonable, right? But a lot of times I think, especially today, you'll have parents that want to treat their children with like ADHD medication and things like that when they're just really just being a child without really necessarily expressing these ADHD tendencies, right? Right? They just kind of want a quick fix. And I think that the use of medicine, specifically when it comes to the brain, there's so
Hmm.
many implications, like negative implications a lot of
Yeah.
times. And so now that you mentioned this, if there's in the future a way where you can just target the specific part of the brain that needs to be adjusted, right? I think that's a
Yeah.
very big advance that
Yeah. No, for
medicine
sure.
definitely needs to look into.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And I mean, it's one of, if you look at the trend, mental health is really deteriorating, not just in the US, across the world. As people are getting more technologically advanced, as people are getting more isolated, as the way human societies are evolving, it almost seems like, mental health really is also at least the need for uh, the mental health seems to be also getting worse with time. And there's definitely going to be a very big need to understand how we can solve these, various conditions that's coming up.
Yeah. Do you think, and again, this goes back to my idea that whenever possible, it's best to avoid the use of medicine. That's my opinion. But do you think that, for example, when it comes to this increasing um, issue of mental health in the world, I think there's better ways to try to deal with it first before taking the medicine route. You can try meditation, you can try a
I mean,
healthy lifestyle.
that's true for any medical condition. I mean, prevention is always better than cure. I mean, there is no doubt about that. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, it's also, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's definitely true. I mean, many a times we can take, we might take certain examples and extrapolate that to a generalization. But I think in most cases, people are being treated because they have to be treated. I mean, it's some, and I realize that I make many times, even me, make these generalized statements about, hey, people shouldn't take these medications. I mean, it's harmful, but it's very hard to know what, even for something like ADHD, or it's it's very hard to know what that person is going through unless you have that condition, right? I mean, if someone is opting for that, it's probably because they're not able to handle that specific situation. I'm not saying it's true in all cases. It's
yeah,
possible that
yeah,
certain people are misusing it or just taking it for small cases, but in many cases, we just don't know what that person is going through. It's very hard
yeah,
to understand. This becomes almost true when you look at depression. I mean, especially in India, mental health is not taken very seriously. At least it wasn't being taken very seriously. There would be people who are depressed, and family members be like, hey, what's wrong with you, man? Just get, just like, just what, just go out or just get something, done, or look for some fix, like, going out for a walk or something like that. But unless you're depressed, unless you're in that state, you have no clue what that feels like. And if that person needs medication, and you would have people telling, hey, you don't need medication for depression, just go do some activity and you'll be fine, or go out with friends and play, you'll be fine. I mean, I, it's not, doesn't work that way. I mean,
yeah. No, I think um uh, it's complicated because I think that medication, it should be used, but before I think you should try everything else.
No, for sure, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about. I mean, anything that, especially uh, psychiatric medication, has a lot of side effects, right? I mean, these are medications, and many of these were discovered by chance. Many of the medications used in psychiatry were accidental discoveries, and we don't really know how many of these drugs work in its full extent either. And a lot of them have very, very bad side effects as well. So there is no doubt that you only go to these, start using the medications when you have run out of all other options. I mean,
Yeah,
with that, I'm completely with you.
because I think a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people, but I think there is a good amount of people that have these tendencies to, maybe these depressive tendencies, or tend to have things that affect them emotionally in a negative way, right? And I think some people try to look for an easy fix in medicine, like, oh,
Right.
I could, because a lot of times it's hard to commit to meditating every day, to going and exercising, to eating healthy, to doing all these
Yeah.
things that could very well fix someone's depression, right? But
No,
it's
that's
just so
true.
much easier to just take a medicine, a pill,
That's
and be
true.
like, okay, that's it.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an aspect that needs to be more talked about. How to prevent, how to maintain your health. I mean, these things need to be more discussed and more encouraged as
Yeah.
well,
Or
especially
how
in
to
schools.
treat, maybe before giving up on these
No,
alternative
for sure.
treatments
Yeah,
and going to
yeah,
medication.
yeah. No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that.
But I definitely think that there are people that need medication, and in that
Right.
case, of course, then people should take it.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think with this progression, it would, like, with the research that you are doing, and having that ability to eliminate the side effects,
But
it's such a
right.
big advancement.
Well, I must also point that when I mentioned what I did, it's really the big picture, in the sense that what I do is fundamental science, fundamental research. So its applications are really far-fetched, in the sense that, you know, when I gave the scenario of being treated, that's not really what I'm I'm aiming to do. It's just
Okay.
it's a possible outcome in the distant future,
Something that could be derived from your research.
eh, later on,
Right.
because a lot of neuroscience or a lot of brain research is fundamental, just because we don't know how the brain works, right? So even to get to the point where we can make these applications, which are happening in certain small ways, a lot of the work is to get to the point where we even understand how the brain works. Like today, you could, if you want to do a cardiac surgery, you can develop ways to replace a valve or to fix a valve, because you know how the heart works so well, right? But that's not true for the brain. So even if you want to, hypothesize to build a medication in a specific way, right? So if you want to, the way research works is you build an hypothesis and then you try to test that hypothesis. But the thing with brain research is that even to build an hypothesis, to test a drug, to see if it works or not, we have very little knowledge of how the brain works at all. So a lot of the work, including mine, is to get to the point where we try to understand how the brain works before we can go for its applications.
Right. So this, for example, this dying of cells and getting a kind of like this
Readout,
mapping of neurons, right?
right?
The applications when it comes to, say, psychiatry or other aspects of neuroscience, that these come further down the line. What you're specifically trying to do, from what I understand, is you're trying to achieve a greater knowledge of exactly how the brain functions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
that's pretty
want to get
much
the big picture to then be able to dive into the more specific things.
right. But you know what, Alan, a far more sooner, I don't know what's the right word, sooner, a far more faster application of my work is in something called brain machine interfaces.
Okay.
So once you understand how the brain encodes specific information, it becomes, with the way computer science and a lot of artificial intelligence is developing, to use these knowledge to build machines which can interact with the brain is a far more, you know, uh, sooner, I don't know what's the right word, like
Yeah.
something
It's
that
some
can happen more
it's
early,
yeah, I guess it's a more proximal outcome.
right? Just
Yeah.
because, it's just writing, if you understand computer science, it's just writing a function, like a
Mhm.
transfer function, which uses the pattern that the brain is generating and transfer that to any command that a machine can read. So let's say every time you move your hand, if the brain is firing a specific pattern. So now you don't really, in this case, you don't really need to know what that signal means, whether it's actually causally related to hand movement, whether it's associated with activating certain spinal muscles, whether it's communicating with certain other areas of the brain to run a specific. You don't need to know anything, because that signal is correlated with hand movement. Every time the hand moves. So now, if you think that I want to move my hand and that signal is generated, you just take a readout, build a transfer function, and communicate that with a machine. And the machine is going to move its hand.
Okay,
It's
so
because
this
it's
is
correlated.
so this kind of application could be transferred over to artificial intelligence and like a robot and coordinating the
Exactly.
same movements that the brain would have.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And you said that's like a more, like you said,
Immediate. I would say a
an
more
earlier
immediate
application
application.
of it.
Yeah. A more immediate application. Yeah. And it's being
Okay.
done as well.
Oh, it's currently being done right now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are, very wonderful, beautiful experiments where paraplegic patients. So these are people who can't move neck down
Right. Okay.
because of an accident or certain
An
other
injury
case
or
reasons,
something, right?
right? And all you have to do is while you record from mouse, the certain or monkeys, certain areas are associated with hand movement. And then in these patients, you put an electrode in and you ask them, hey, just think that you're moving your hand and see what the signal looks like, right? And then and then you just build a transfer function for machine learning, where you use one set of signals to give a command to another set of signals, right? Now you know that every time the person thinks, these neurons fire in a specific way, right? So now you put the electrodes in there and the person just thinks, hey, I want to move my hand in a specific direction. The machine moves its hand in a specific direction. Or the
Wow.
person thinks A, B, C, D, the brain behaves. You don't really know if the signal is actually encoding A, B, C, D. Just that the signal is correlated with whenever the person thinks A. You don't know if it's causally linked. This is associated. So now when the person thinks A, the signal is generated, the computer generates A. So now the person can speak just because when he thinks, that signal is generated, and then you can make the computer say the word A, for example.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Say, for example, I have a question. Say, for example, a person lost an arm. Could a prosthetic arm be put in place and then connected to an electrode so that they could move it?
It's already there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean,
So there's
it's not commercially available, but
right.
these are research labs which have connected electrodes to humans, and some that don't even have harm. They're paraplegic patients. They can't move any of their body parts, and they just have to think, hey, I want to grab this cola to drink, and they think, and then the machine does it for them.
How are the brain signals converted to a function? What like
It's
how is it defined?
it's quite simple, right? So when you have an electrode in your brain, electrode measures electrical signals.
Right.
Electrical signals are just numbers. So every time you think, let's say there are 100 neurons. To make it easy, the 10 neurons, the first 5 neurons are in 1, the second 5 neurons are zeros.
Mhm.
For every time you start to move, the first set of 5 neurons are 1, the second set of 5 neurons are 0. You just write a function which says, hey, if first 5 neurons are 1 and the second set of 5 neurons are 0, that means the person is going to start moving the hand. And you tell the machine, get ready to move. As the person is moving its hand, these 10 neurons fire with one neuron being 1, other neuron being 0, other neuron being 1, or they keep fluctuating in time. There's ones and zeros. So you just keep reading that out and you say, when I'm in space, when I'm in specific direction, these numbers are fluctuating up and down, ones and zeros. You know that's happening repeatedly. So before you go to that point where you can use these, you build you do these experiments 100 times and see how in these 100 times how these patterns fluctuate. And if there is something that's reliably happening, these ones and zeros of these 100
Right.
neurons. And
This
then
binary code.
Exactly. And then that as the person is moving in space, when at each point, the neurons are in a specific states of ones and zeros. So you just send that to a machine. Whenever it reads that there is a 1 and 0 in a specific from specific neuron, the hand needs to be in that specific, the robotic hand needs to be in a specific position.
And so then this binary code is converted into a function that then can be used for the machine to replicate the movement.
Exactly.
Okay. Does each person do the neurons for each person fire in a distinct way, or is it the same for every person?
No, it's distinct.
Okay.
So you need to build a function for each person.
Yeah. So you can't use the data from one patient to apply it to another person.
No, that's we haven't gotten there yet. But also because most of the work, at least currently, most of the work is still correlational. It's not a causal association, right? Correlation in the sense that we know that this is correlated with the movement, but whether it's causing the movement, we still don't know.
Yeah, it could be some other aspect of movement or some other sensory input, right?
Some other thing that's happening during that movement, which is being processed there, but we know that it's happening reliably every time the person moves. So we just use that, and it's not hard, right? I mean, if you have the electrode in there, you can in fact, and with the size of computer chips currently, silicon chips, which are getting smaller and smaller, you can just train the network in real time after you implant it. So let's say the next day you get up, it might be that the person is using a different code. The person might have to spend the first 10 minutes just, trying to train the neural network in a specific way. And now I'm hypothesizing, none of this has been done. I'm just extrapolating what could be ways that you could use to train these networks to perform in a specific way.
Yeah, and that's where some machine learning could come into play as well, just because, as you don't have to.
All of this is done with machine learning.
Right. Well, okay. So you don't have to. So let me understand. When the person does a specific movement and there's a binary code attached to it, does the researcher have to manually code the function, or is it automatically perceived?
Well, when you say machine learning, none of it is actually automatic. I mean, you have to write how to train the network. I mean, today, so you can do that. You can just make the network. You can write a function to train the network to learn to associate that hand movement with that. And that's what's happening.
But once the network is written, then it learns by itself without you having to interact with it.
So there's no learning, right? The training is the learning. The training part, where it's learning to associate that hand movement with that specific, the neuronal activity with that hand movement, that's the learning part, the training period. After that, it's not learning anymore. It's just transferring that brain commands into hand movements. So there is no learning happening after that initial period of training where it's associating that hand movement with the neuronal activity.
But in the initial period of training, I feel like it would be practically impossible to do every single possible movement of a human,
True. And that's the reason why the field is not there yet. So you can only perform a specific set of movements. But if you would extrapolate, right? I mean, so let's say you have a chip with 5 different networks, and each network is, you have trained each network for one group of movements, for example. I mean, I'm really I'm really hypothesizing at this point,
Okay.
thinking free flow, but you could train each network to do something different, but the principle is the same. I mean, you could extrapolate it the way you want to. The principle is just that, if you would take one hand movement, you spend 1 hour of thinking, you want to move the hand, and then the network is training that thinking process of firing with the specific hand movement. I mean, there's always going to be a period where you just can't function on the go. You have to spend some time to train the network to associate that neural pattern with a specific movement. And the training period is what you call learning in machine learning. And once that learning is done, then you use that function to keep transferring that thought to a movement. And it's not just that, right? I mean, you could also be training it in real time as well. But how that happens, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an
Right.
expert in that field.
So the goal would be rather, well, when it comes to this machine learning, I think, or I believe that the goal would then be to reduce the training time to the least amount possible, so that you don't have to spend an hour doing it, but rather you can just think about it once
Oh
and then
yeah,
it gets it.
oh yeah, for sure. It's going to. I mean, any network takes a lot of time to train in the beginning because there are numbers in those neurons. By neurons, I mean the neurons of your neural network, which are random in the beginning. And the first set of training requires hours just because you're trying to reach a point where the prediction is really good. But
Yeah.
thereon, once you've trained the network, training it for further fine tuning becomes far more faster than the initial period.
Yeah, and as developments, I'm sure, come in technology and neuroscience,
Oh
it'll get
yeah,
even
yeah, for
faster.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You know, you said that these advances are already being applied in certain labs, right? When did you see this, maybe progressing to start to be applicable to commercial use, or for some other use?
Do you know the company called Neuralinks?
By Elon, right?
Right. So,
Yeah.
for example, that's a company which is trying to get these aspects into commercial application. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism within the scientific community as well about the company and the claims they make. Um, Primarily because, as I said, we are far away from understanding, even to a large extent, how the brain works. So, if you want to make a commercial application, I think it's essential that we have sufficient theoretical understanding of these things. Sure, it's you can, in research settings, you can explore different dimensions, but I think it's like you can't give a drug for a heart attack without truly understanding how the heart works, without truly understanding its effects on how the heart works, right? And that's true. And you need to apply similar principles for the brain as well. I mean, while there are promising approaches of using these technologies, I think we are very far away from understanding how the brain works. So it's very hard for me to put a put a date of where you can bring commercial applications. But I think more than these invasive technologies, I think the use of non-invasive technologies are possibly going to pick up soon. You know, you have where you using EEG, for example, using those kinds of readouts for specific applications, I think is going to come up. I think it's going to come up a lot in the next 5 years, or even the next 10 years for that matter. And I can imagine, I mean, now I'm again hypothesizing, I can imagine using these for gaming, for example, or for, trying to uh, 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 build uh, robotics I mean, I'm sure I'm guessing, but I'm pretty sure even the Department of Defense is exploring the dimensions to build, you know, war robots that could be controlled by humans thinking about moving the robots in a specific way. And we aren't there yet in terms of using EEG signals to get such fine-tuned uh, readouts. But I think, with some advances in computer technology and breaking the code, we can, as long as it's non-invasive, I think you can build technologies to kind of access this dimension of this field.
Yeah. Now, when we're talking about Neuralink right now, for example, um, there's I'm sure there's a lot of different people that work together in these projects. You have neuroscientists. I'm sure you have um, someone, some sort of, doctors that also focus on the body as a whole, because you have to see how it interacts with the rest of the body and stuff like that. And I'm sure you also have like computer scientists working in this part as well. I don't know. I'm not sure if but like, how does, say, for example, you as a neuroscientist, or a computer scientist, what does each person focus on in a project like this?
Um, what do you mean?
Because
Like,
it's something I'm interested in, like in the future, being interested in the brain and being interested in somewhat in technology. I'm just curious if
I mean, you mean at each step?
at each step, but also how, because for example, right, when doing this type of research, and I guess creating, for example, from turning this binary code into the function that then replicates the movement. When it comes to, you know, interacting with the brain itself, you're going to have a neuroscientist do that. You're not going to have a computer scientist. For
Right.
example, when does a computer scientist come into play in these types of
I mean, the moment you,
situations?
the moment the moment you record the information, the moment I get the data out, I think the computer scientist can take over immediately.
Okay.
But there's always going to be an interaction, right? I mean, any statistical application, when you're building these statistical tools, machine learning tools, it's also essential how you model these uh, these uh, these functions, right? And I guess giving a fundamentals of using the fundamentals of neuroscience, you can guide these models to be built in a specific way, so that the amount of errors that these models would make would go down significantly. But I guess, yeah, with the moment the data comes out from the brain, the moment scientists would extract this data from the brain, I think that's where a computer scientist or a mathematician or an engineer would come into picture
And
immediately
I'm
after.
guessing, there are current softwares too that are used in these types of
Oh
research.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, as a matter of fact, Alan, computer science is so entrenched. I mean, not just neuroscience, probably in any field, that I think it's probably, I probably am even wrong in saying that it comes after. It's probably there in every step of this journey, right? Even to make those electrodes, you have electrical engineers designing those electrodes in a specific way to set into the brain. And then you have, and in order to, when you record those electric signals, to write, and these are all digitized. All of these signals that I record on the brain, which is an analog signal, are digitized in the electrode. To write certain low-level codes to digitize those signals that you're reading and amplify it already in the electrode, you need computer engineers there as well. And in designing those silicon chips, you need computer engineers as well. So they're pretty much there in every step of this process.
It's
And then the
it's a whole
softwares
team
to
working on it.
softwares to interact with these. I mean, it's not just computer engineers, right? You have electrical engineers, you have mechanical engineers, you have structural engineers, you have material engineers, all of these people working together to build the best possible way to integrate all of these knowledge to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. I mean,
Yeah.
the neuroscience is not there yet, in the sense that these multi uh, field interactions are not happening at that extent where it's supposed to be. I don't even know if it's supposed to be happening, maybe because we're not there in understanding the brain yet. But if you would want to create this product, and I'm pretty sure that's what's happening in a company like Neuralinks, where all of these engineers are put together to solve this one problem of very cleanly extracting the signal from the brain and then sending that to a robotic arm.
Yeah. There's a, I'm sure there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not as simple as just one person does this, the other
No,
person
no,
does this.
no. Even for one, it's crazy in a scientific lab or in a research lab. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 people over 15, 20 years working on a project, with one leaving, another one taking over to finally get to a complete theory of how something works, for example.
Yeah.
It's a lot of small steps, small work happening towards achieving a goal.
Yeah. Do you have any plans for yourself as to what you want to do next? Do you want to keep doing research, or do you have any something
As
else
of
in
now,
mind?
yeah, I mean, as of now, so I mean, I must say, I mean, we explored mostly the interaction between computer science and neuroscience. I mean, there is a whole field of neuroscience research that looks into emotions and, you
Right.
know, cognition, you know, and we haven't explored that direction, but there's a whole other field of neuroscience into,
Yeah.
looking into those aspects as well. I mean, it could be interesting for a computer science student. This really is like the most attractive uh, side of neuroscience, but there is this, if you were to talk, there is a whole other you know aspect of neuroscience research and technology that are coming up, right? I mean, if we could just digress a bit from what I want to do, um, I think 10 years back, or 10 years, 12 years back, there was this technology which really changed the field called optogenetics, right? So the way that works is you use genetics to insert an ion channel into the brain cell, right? It was actually this ion channel was discovered in a fungus, I think, one of these, another species. But you put this ion channels in the brain cell. So as I told you, the brain cell functions by electric signals, right?
Right.
So now, because you have the power of genetics, and you can choose which cell type you want to put these ion channels into. And the way these ion channels work is, if you shine light, these ion channels open and send in an electric current. So you express these ion channels into a specific part of the brain or a specific cell type. You shine light, just blue light, just shine blue light, and these cells turn on. Like, by turn on, I mean you can activate them. So this is a huge side of research where there's a part of the brain called the amygdala,
Mm-hmm.
which is involved
Response
in,
for the emotional responses, right?
right. So
Yeah.
you put the ion channels in that area, you shine light, the animal immediately goes and attacks whatever is there in front of it. It's like you turn on the predator behavior. Or
Just by shining light.
just by shining light. You shine light, it immediately goes and attacks whatever is there in front of it. Or you turn on the light and you shut down the fear response. So the animal is not scared of the predator anymore in front of it, because you've turned off the cells which are encoding for fear. Or you activate fear. The animal is scared of everything around it. Or you activate certain cells in the hypothalamus which controls hunger, and the animal is hungry all the time to the point that it eats till it dies, just by shining light. Or you turn it off, the animal starves.
So you mean by shining light specifically in the area of the brain responsible for these things?
The thing is, because you have encoded these ion channels in those cells, you don't even have to be close to the area, because only as long as light penetrates, only those cells which are encoding that ion channel is going to be activated or deactivated. Right?
Right.
So you just shine light anywhere close by, and you can literally almost like play God. All of a sudden, you can command what the animal needs to do. And that's where neuroscience is now. And I think this technology really has a way, as I said, to kind of break this point where we're struggling to understand how the brain works, by now really understanding how small parts of the brain are involved by causally associated. Till now, a lot of work was correlational, right? So now with this new tool, gives us a way to causally understand how these different parts of the brain are associated with certain aspects of your emotion, your cognition, and decision making. I mean, I don't want to go as far as consciousness, but these more high level aspects of
How is
behavior.
light shined to these specific areas?
Just using an LED.
Or is it just that simple? Yeah.
That's simple. Just shine an LED and the animal does that. behavior.
That's interesting. And what kind of, with these types of research, with that specific type of research, when it comes to shining light in these specific parts of the brain and seeing what responses these animals have, how can this be transferred over and applied to a human, or what type of
Now just
research can
think
this be
about it,
applied?
right? For example, if you can shut off the fear response, right? You can, I mean, again, a lot of this is far-fetched before you can apply it to humans.
Yeah.
But one immediate application would be in treating PTSD. If these people are struggling from fear responses, post-traumatic stress disorders, you turn that set of neurons which seem to be active when you're having fear. And that's one
Okay.
application. But the reason I'm so excited is not, the applications is one aspect, but for a fundamental researcher, the avenue or the control it gives to understand how the brain
The
works,
understanding, yeah.
yeah, it's immense.
Right.
You know,
Because then, like you said, like all these different applications, these are just side things, or the possible paths that could be taken, right? But
right?
all these, you can't take any of these if you don't have the understanding in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes sense that that's what encompasses everything.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And like you said, there's so many areas of neuroscience. It's hard to just talk about one
Yeah.
specific one. And it's not that I find, technology the most interesting. I think it I wasn't I think technology is, where the future is going, right? It's just hard to ignore it. But there's, like you said, there's so many aspects that are very interesting, consciousness, for example. I tend to listen to podcasts or something, that sometimes have episodes where they talk about consciousness, and like you said, the philosophy aspect of it. Why do we think, why do we perceive certain things?
Yeah.
What do these thoughts mean? All these types of things that, we can't answer. We don't know.
Yeah.
And so there's consciousness, and then you said behavior. There's all these different aspects of psychology, neuroscience, the brain, that I agree are very interesting. It's not just technology that I
Oh,
personally
no,
find
no, no.
interesting.
I didn't mean it that way, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's at least, of late, the moment we discuss about artificial intelligence or machine learning, it seems to have taken over the
The
amount of space.
conversation.
Yeah. The people talk about it that we immediately, a lot of it goes in the direction, and we don't really explore certain other aspects, which I'm sure is going to come up. It's just probably a phase in the evolution of technologies and human interest. It
Yeah.
might probably go down, and then human interest might suddenly be taken over by some other aspect. I mean, it's new. I mean, it's pretty cool, I must say. I mean, the way AI and ML is growing, it's definitely a new chapter in human
Yeah.
technological development.
Well, it's hard to cover every single
Yeah.
aspect in one,
Yeah, for
in
sure.
an
For
hour,
sure.
hour and a half,
For
2 hours,
sure. Yeah.
and that's what, it's not just, with neuroscience. I was talking to a this astronomer, and so I was
Wow.
talking to her a couple of days ago, and we were talking about star formation. And of course, there's so many aspects of astronomy, when it comes to not just astronomy, but astrophysics and all these different things. And star formation is just star formation is a very small part of astronomy, right? And and then we talked a little bit about um black holes and what they are. But then you have, you aside from stars, you have planets, you have how different objects travel around the galaxy. You have all these different aspects of astronomy you can't cover in, like, in a very small amount of time. And I told her, and I'll tell you the same thing, is, at any point you can let me know and we can talk about something else.
Oh, no, for sure.
There's
Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's there's just so much, and there's so much learning that you can do. And when it comes to things, I've told a couple people, but the main reason I wanted to do this podcast is because I like to learn. But it's not just that I like to learn in general, it's that I like to learn about things that I enjoy learning about,
No, yeah, no, for
and
sure.
and by having the, I guess, the ability to reach out to the people I want to reach out to, and
Yeah,
in the fields that I want to talk, reach out to and talk about, then
yeah,
I have the ability to more or less have a say in what it is that I'm learning. So with you, for example, we were talking about neuroscience, and I'm fascinated by the brain. I've been, for the past years, and it's all the aspects of the brain. I'd be happy to talk about every other aspect that you have to say and
no,
talk
for
about.
sure. No, for sure, for sure. I didn't mean it that way, but it's just that, uh, yeah, at that point I was like, hey, there's other side that we haven't explored. So, but anyway,
Well,
maybe it's for the future.
yeah, yeah. What's your favorite side? Do you have one?
Um, I would say it's how the brain control emotions. I mean,
Okay.
I don't want to, I'm still going to study sensory motor processing because there's this saying that um, the brain is evolved to make animals move, you know, and that's pretty much what, it kind of puts how much movement is an integral aspect of why the brain exists. Everything that you do is to kind of, your ability to change the environment is all because you can move. So I think that's still what I will be, to answer your previous question, what I want to do is to understand how further explore. I mean, we're still, very, very, not even close to understanding how sensory information is processed to generate motor commands. So I'll still be, you know, doing research in the direction. But I guess what really fascinates me more than that is the field of emotions. And at least I find it very hard to study emotions, especially in animals, just because it's very hard to get a readout from them about what they feel, how they feel.
Yeah.
So for me, the amount of effort I put in terms of being able to, design experiments to answer those questions didn't seem like something I could do, just because it's so hard to interpret what animals are feeling.
Do
So
you see at some point, perhaps with research techniques that aren't as invasive, do you see the possibility to at some point
for
study
sure, yeah,
humans?
yeah.
Okay.
Once technology gets to the point where we can do non-invasive recordings, I'm sure we'll get there. Maybe not soon, but at some point. I think then that area of research would be spectacular. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess it's emotions is what makes humans so much
Humans.
more. Yeah,
It's what differentiates us from machines for the most
exactly.
part.
Yeah, for the most part,
No, that's
sensory motor processing is probably what most machines are going to do anyway in the future.
yeah. No, I agree, and I think behavior is a very interesting thing. And like you said, it's hard to understand what an animal is feeling, since they just, how do you communicate with them? You can't,
Yeah,
right? So
it's very hard.
if we're able to design ways that we can interact with humans and have human research to where they're not affected in way, and it can comply with the ethics of
Yeah,
studying humans, then I
yeah,
think that would be a big development.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I appreciate you talking about technology and these other things that we also talked a little bit about. But like I said, I mean, I'd be happy to talk about these other things in more detail. Um, you can let me know whenever you're available.
No,
I'm
for
sure you're
sure.
very
Yeah,
busy, and we
yeah,
can get into consciousness or behavior, or
yeah.
I mean, what other sides of neuroscience are there? I'm sure there's
Oh,
tons.
there are
There's
plenty. Yeah, there are
plenty.
plenty. There's
Yeah.
plenty. Yeah. I mean, oh, you asking me?
No, no, I'm just saying there's plenty. I agree
Oh,
with you.
yeah, there's plenty of directions that you can explore,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And I'd be happy to, like I said, to talk about it, about any other one whenever
No, for
you're
sure. Yeah,
available.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, I mean, I think it was a great experience for me as well. The first time I'm in a podcast, so it was really nice to talk about these uh to someone who's really interested in the field as well.
Yeah. I think that's
And
cool. I think it's cool specifically when like someone is interested, because if when it comes to lecturing, for example, in a classroom, if you're kind of giving a presentation or something, half the class, maybe a third, two-thirds of the class, a lot of times most of the class is not going to be interested in what you're saying, and you're just kind of
yeah,
saying it, and it's coming through one ear, out of the other, and they're not even paying attention.
Oh, it's too funny. I had a dream today, I know, just when I woke up, where I'm teaching in a classroom and I tell the students, hey, whoever is not interested, just get out of the class, and just the remaining ones stay, and then I continue with the lecture.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's often the case. And that goes back to what we were saying about kind of education at the beginning, is that a lot of times we're getting taught things that we don't particularly find interesting, or at least not in the way that we would like to learn it. And so we don't pay attention that much. And so having the opportunity to talk to someone that is interested, and that me in this case, for example, clearly I know a lot less than you. You've been researching this for a very long time. And so you're able to tell me things that I don't know, and I'm able to learn. But then also I'm able to at least, give some opinions on things that
Yeah,
might
no,
provide some sort of insight in some
it was
aspect,
great. Yeah, it was a nice conversation for sure. Yeah,
Yeah. That's the cool thing about these things, you get to
yeah,
talk to people that are also interested in that same thing as you.
yeah. No, yeah, for sure.
But thank you again. I appreciate the
No, it
time.
was great, Alan. Thanks for this opportunity from my side as well to put my, I don't know, to just have a nice conversation with
Yeah.
with you.
Now, last thing, where can people find you or your research, or is there anything that you want to kind of put out there?
Oh, wow, I wasn't prepared for that.
If
I don't
if you don't
know.
want to, if you don't want to put anything out, that's fine. I'm just asking.
I mean, you could, just like how you found me. It's my Duke website. I'm on Twitter, if that helps.
Yeah,
Um,
your Twitter is good. I'll give
Let me
you a follow on Twitter as well.
great. Yeah, I think my Twitter ID is hm_Mohan. Yeah,
Okay.
hm_Mohan.
I'll put it under the podcast description anyway, so don't
Yeah,
worry about
right,
that.
right. Yeah,
And your, profile if you want me to do that.
yeah, that'd be fun. Right, nice talking to you, Alan.
Yes, thank you.